Right, so tonight we're going to be looking into background. We'll be looking into scenario outline, an example, and then we would also be writing an invalid test scenario as well. And thereafter, we would then look into resolving any framework issues anybody has got. If you have any questions, we'll also answer them as well. And if I'm not able to answer them, hopefully by the time Mr. Deji joins, he should be able to answer them. So from the last class, we were able to finish up, or so far, we've been able to, I'm just going to summarize what we've done so far. So far, we've been able to install Java Maven. We've also been able to set them up in our environment variables, or if you're using a Mac, you've been able to set them up in your Bash profile. And then we've also been able to install IntelliJ IDE, the community version. And we've been able to set up a new project from scratch. And what we've done so far in IntelliJ is installing the two major plugins that we need. So can someone tell me the two plugins that we have installed in IntelliJ quickly, please?
Cucumber and Gherkin.
Yeah, so we've been able to install the Cucumber and Gherkin plugins, and we've also gone ahead to, and then in terms of our folder structure in IntelliJ, we have been able to update our POM file, created the test ng, and all our folder structures like the Cucumber manager, Cucumber options. And under the Cucumber options, we have the test runner. We've created a page object folder. We've created a step definition folder, which contains our step definition that is obviously associated with the feature file that we've created. We've created our resources folder, and we've marked it as a test resource root. And then we've also created the feature folder as well. And we've been able to write our Gherkin step for a positive scenario for the inquiry page. And we've also created the corresponding step definitions for those ones. And then we've gone ahead to find the elements and send in the required action or one Chrome driver to perform. We've also been able to look into assertions as well. And I hope everybody has been able to look at the assertion link again. I don't know if I sent it last week or if I forgot to send it. But nobody asked me, so I'm guessing it was probably on the PDF document that people have looked at it. And so today, like I mentioned, we're going to go straight into scenario outline first of all. Then we're also going to look into a negative scenario. Then we'll then look into background, because backgrounds will be more easy to explain once we've done the scenario outlines and then the negative test as well, or negative scenario also. So yeah, so let us dive right into it. Just a minute. So I sort of mentioned scenario outline briefly when I was talking about Gherkin at the very start of our training class. So if you don't remember, you can go back to that video where I talked about Gherkin, but I'm going to talk about scenario outline briefly. So scenario outline is used to run the same scenarios for two or more different sets of test data. So right now we currently have a positive or an end-to-end scenario, which is the very first one that we have. And you could be in a situation where you need to test, or you need to run this same scenario for different test data. So test data is an example of a test data would be your first name field, would be your last name field, would be it could be the email, it would obviously be the height. Let me actually open up the web page so you can see properly what I mean. Go back. So an example of test data is the first name field, the last name field, the email, the height, the location, even the vegan option as well. Like there are different test data that you can obviously pick from here. Your hobbies and interests field would obviously accept different test data. So another test data that I could have here could be another person's information that I want to fill out on the form. So basically test data in this case are like informations that would always, that are not unique, that you can always change. And they're basically using them to test different fields or parameters on the form that you're trying to run your automation test on. So scenario outline is basically using the same scenario for different test data, because you could have like 4 or 5 or 50 test data, and you don't want a situation whereby you are having to have this same scenario in 50 different places. So instead of having it in 50 different places, you'll just have it in one place. And then your test data will just be examples underneath the scenario that you currently have. So scenario outline and examples go hand in hand. So wherever you see scenario outlines, that means you are technically going to be using examples. And these examples will be containing the test data that you want to pass on to the scenario. So let me give you an example. So I'm going to copy what I currently have here because I want to write scenario outline for a positive test. And instead of having scenario up here, like I mentioned, I'm going to be using scenario outline. And you can already see it's already popping up. And it's showing me an error because something else is missing. So I mentioned that examples and scenario outline go hand in hand. So it's already telling me that example section is missing. So I can just either tell it to create the example section for me, which it has done here, or I can just simply type it out myself as well. And it's going to look something like this. Examples. And then just 2 slashes. So this is just how your example section is going to look like. And you can see that once I added the example section, the red line on that scenario outline is no longer there. So example section and scenario outline go hand in hand. That's just one thing you need to know. And I want to determine what test data is going to be changed within my scenario. So to make it easier for everybody, I'm going to use 3 fields, and that means I'm going to have test data for those 3 fields as well. So the first field is going to be first name, the second field is going to be last name, and the third field is going to be email address. So these are the 3 fields that I'm going to write, or I'm going to create test data for. So for when it comes to test data, the ways you can generate them is to either if you're working in an agile environment and you have a scrum master, a product owner, a scrum master, BA, you've got your devs, both front end and back end, you've got your functional or your manual tester, and then you've got your automation tester as well. And you probably have your DA person also. So that's an agile environment. So in a case like that, you can always get your test data from your manual tester, because there's a high chance that the manual tester has probably done the test way ahead of when you are going to be automating, or maybe within the similar time frame, and you can simply just use the test data that they've used manually to test the scenario you're working on, or you can create your own test data as well. So in this case, since I technically don't have a manual tester, and I'm the only tester in my team, so that's just an assumption. I'm just going to create my own test data. And your test data obviously have to be meaningful and also go in accordance with what you're trying to look into. So how do I write my test data out under the example section? Like I mentioned, I'm going to be creating test data for 3 different fields. So the first one is first name. Second is last name. And the third is email address. And you can see that they're obviously grayed out. So that's because they have not been used anywhere in my scenario just yet. And for me to then use them in my scenario, all I need to do is to copy the names that I've given them down here, because there's a high chance that the names you've given them down here will probably be different to the ones that are currently inside your scenario or your steps. So I'm just going to be safe, I'll copy the names I have here and I'll go to where I want to use them. And all I'm going to say is, given I fill out the first name, and last name, fields, it's meant to be plural, and I enter the email address, so you can see that I've used them inside my Gherkin step already, and they're already in purple. So if they're not in purple, that means something is wrong. You've done something wrong. And the way I've used them here is I've used double quotes, angle brackets, then I place the name in there. And you can obviously see that I need to create step definitions for them. That is because the step definition I have here in the first step is different from the second one, which is very, very obvious. They are not the same step definitions. So I need to create step definition for the two new lines that I've just made changes to. And how do I do that? As usual, click on the orange, yellow parts, and then the bulb is going to show up. Click on that, create. I can click on create all step definitions. So it's going to create step definitions for the two new steps. So I'm going to click on create all step definitions. And you can see my step definition file is already showing. So all I need to do is to click on inquiry step def. And my steps are going to be created down here. And if I go back to my feature file, you would see that it is no longer showing a different color. Now it's not showing how it's meant to show. So I've basically created step definitions for those two steps. Now, the next thing I need to do is to actually fill in these example sections with the different test data that I want to pass in while running the test. So let's do that. So first name, last name, email. Let me pick up the email that I used previously here. So usually I'm actually meant to delete the one I have up here, but because I don't want to confuse anybody, or I'm actually meant to actually update this one to have scenario outline, but I don't want to do that. I want that to be separate. But in a normal working environment, with the look of things, this test is also the same as this one. The only difference is I'm adding more test data to this one, while this one just has one test data, which we've already passed into our step definition. But I'm going to leave this one the way it is because I want you to obviously have it in your pack. But in a normal working setting, this scenario one and this scenario two are the same thing, because the test data I've used in scenario one is obviously what I've added down here. And all I'm just doing is building up or adding more test data to this one. So let me go on to add more. I'll add three more test data, two more test data here. So we have three altogether. And then another one is yeah, so what I've just done is to like beautify the thing because it was looking a bit off before, like it wasn't neat. So all you need to do is to basically highlight your code using Control A or Command A. The next thing you then need to do is to do Option Control L, which is going to be for Mac. but for Windows, it should be Option. Sorry, on Mac, it is Option Command L. For Windows, it's going to be Option Control L. I hope that's correct. But if that doesn't work, just let me know. Or you can just easily like start adding space, but it just takes time. I'll just use the shortcut to beautify it basically. So I've added 3 test data here, and what I'm going to do now is to obviously fill out my step definitions, because my step definitions for the 2 new steps I've added are currently empty. So how do I do that? So you see that the step definition that we currently have here is a bit different. It's taking in some parameters now. It's taking in 2 string parameters for the first new step definition that has, and I fill out the first name. This is the first name I want to pass in, and the last name, and this is the last name I want to pass in fields. So it's taking in 2 different parameters, 2 strings. So how do I do that? As usual, I need to go back to the first step definition that I have for the first name and last name field. And one thing is very common. When your test runs, your cookie button is always going to show, regardless. Every time the test runs, the cookie button is going to show. So what I'm going to do is to copy this one that says driver.find element by ID cookie.click, because that's obviously one step that I know that would obviously come up on my screen. The cookie button is always going to show and it needs to be clicked on. So I've just gone up to the previous step definition that I have, and I've just copied it and pasted it in this new one. So moving on, what do I need to do next? I need to what do I need to do next now? So I need to pass in my first name and my last name. And just like I've done previously, I'm going to go back to the previous step to look at the XPath that I have used, because the XPath is always going to be the same because we are picking up the first name field. So all I need to do is to go back up and copy the XPath that I have there. I don't need to go back to the web page to get the XPath again. And just like I've done previously, I'm still going to do driver, find element by, this is XPath. XPath dot send keys. I'm still sending in keys. But before I do that, I need to change the argument names or the parameter names that are here. So I'm passing in, the first string I'm going to be passing in is my first name. Then the second string I'm passing in is my last name. So we have string argument 0. So I'm going to change that to something meaningful. And in this case, it's going to be first name, because that's just what I'm passing in. And the second argument here is last name. Right. So coming back to the driver.find element by XPath that I have down here for the first name field. So instead of saying send in keys only or sending keys, what's the other first name I have here? So I have Oyin, Tony, and Jiggy. So instead of saying sending keys Jiggy or sending keys Tonya, I don't need to do that here, because all my tests, my first name that I want to pass in each time the test runs is already declared underneath my example section. So we have Oyin, we have Tonya, we have Jiggy. So how do I tell Chrome driver to pick them up? So it's going to be picking them up using the keyword that I have here, which is first name, and which is also what I've called my string here as well, first name. But the first name in the feature file and the first name in the step definition, they don't have to match. So this one here, I can call it name. I'm just going to use name here so that you're not a bit confused, or you don't have to think that the first name outside obviously has to match the string name that you have here as well. So I'm going to call the first name here name. The string here is going to be called name. So it's going to be picking up. So this name is already connected to the first name section here. So every time Chrome driver gets here, it's going to go into the string, because this string is going to contain, this string name is going to contain Tonya, Oyin, Tonya, and Jiggy. And the first one is always going to pick every single time is Oyin, because that's the very first one on my list here. So instead of saying .send keys Oyin, I'm going to say .send keys name. So pick the name, the string name here. And this string name is obviously connected to my feature file already, which is obviously for the scenario outline part. So it's going to pick up all the names that I've listed underneath here. I don't have to explicitly define them here by saying semicolon, double quote, Oyin, double quote, Tonya, double quote, Jiggy. I don't need to do that. So I'm going to do the same thing for my last name. I need to get a locator for the last name field. And like I mentioned, at the very beginning, I'm finding the element by name. So all I need to do is to copy the name locator here and go back down here. So this is going to be driver dot find element by name. And I'm going to paste it here. And obviously I'll do dot send keys. So can someone tell me the keys I'm going to be passing here?
Last name.
Thank you. So the last name that I have declared up here is what I'm going to be passing down here. And just like I've given this previous explanation, this last name is going to pick up all the last names that I have under this last name section. So it's going to pick up O, Tanis, and DJ. So it's going to be picking up all the last name here. And that's just how our feature files or our Gherkin steps in our feature file is connected to our step definition. So using parameters, that is how we are able to get the values that we've obviously listed down here into our step definition when the test is running on the Chrome browser. So we're basically passing in parameters which have already been sort of declared in our feature file. So that's just how we pick up multiple test data that you've already declared in your feature file. And we'll obviously do the same thing for our email address section also. So if you go into the email address step definition, and as usual, it already has a temporary parameter name, but I'm just going to change it to email. So this is my parameter name, email, and it's taking up a string value as well. And the string value is what we've sort of declared outside of here, and they are all valid emails also. So if I go back to my step definition, just like I've done previously, driver.find element by what locator type am I using? .send keys. So if I go back up here and pick up the locator I've used for the email, and this is, I'm finding it by name. So we have driver.find element by name, send keys. And the keys I'm going to be sending here would be this email parameter that I've listed here. Oh, why am I typing that again? So I'm going to type here, email. And the email values are going to be picked up from our feature file underneath the section here that says, that lists out all the emails that we have here. So those are the two step definitions I need to update. You can already see that the other ones are already being reused based on what we've used in the very first test as well. So another importance of writing in Gherkin is some of the steps can be reusable anywhere in your automation pack. As far as the wordings are the same, if the wordings are not the same, then obviously I'm going to be having to create a different step definition for them. So assuming I say, and I enter my heights, for instance, it's obviously going to tell me that I need to create a new step definition because there is no step definition that matches it in my step definition file. So obviously, if you want to use the same data that we've used for the very first one, then it needs to be, and I enter my height, which is singular. And the other options that we've picked in our very first test that we've written. So the options for the height is going to be the same. The options for the vegan option will be the same. Actually, let's change the height as well. Let's create different test data for height. So I'm going to just add it down here because the three of them may be the same height, but they may not also be the same height. So I'll just put random height figures. So the height here, for instance, I've obviously not used it anywhere in my working steps. I obviously need to fill it up where I want to use it. And then I need to create a new step definition for this line. Create step definition. And I need to change the parameter name from argument 0 to, I'll just say user height. I don't want to use height because I can use height, but I'll just say user height. And then I need to pick up the locator that I've used for the very first step because it's obviously going to be the same. So I'm getting it by XPath. Driver dot find element by XPath dot, now this is sending in keys into the field dot send keys, and my keys in this case would be user height because it's going to be getting the real value for those individual persons' height from this column here using the user height parameter. So we have four different tests. We have four different fields that are taking in unique test data. And the four different fields are first name, last name, email address, and height. And we have three test data underneath them as well. So now I'm going to ask you a question. How many times would this scenario outline tests run? How many times is it going to run? How many times is it meant to run?
4 times.
Sorry?
4 times.
I just want to figure out who is speaking. Sorry, who spoke just now?
I did. Izu.
Okay, 4 times. Okay. Can anybody else? I want people to respond. How many times do we expect it to run?
I think 4 times.
Okay. Who else?
It's gonna be 3 times.
Dami said 3 times. Okay. Can I get another response, please? How many times do we expect it to run?
It's going to run 3 times because of the names. 3 times.
Larry said 3 times. Okay. So any other response? Okay. Right. So those that said 4 times, those that said 3 times. So I think Izu and Emmanuel said 4. Larry and Dami said 3. So I'm gonna ask Izu or Emmanuel, why do you think it's meant to run 4 times?
Okay. I believe
Because
it's
it
going
will,
to run 4 times because it's supposed to run for first name, last name, email, and the height.
Okay, Emmanuel, why do you think it's going to run 4 times?
I just answered now.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Izu, why do you think it's going to run 4 times?
yeah, I think it will run 4 times because it will be calling up 4 parameters. Like he said, the first name and last name, email and height.
Right. Larry and Dami, why do you think it's going to run 3 times?
Yeah, I choose it by horizontal. Oyi, Antonia, and Jide. That's why I said 3 times because it's 3 lines.
Okay. And Dami,
If you remember when we run it initially, we run it once and everything is done once, meaning that the code was able to fill all the form at once before it closed. So meaning that by the time is doing Onyi's height, Onyi's first name, last name, email, that's one time. That's how it would do
amazing.
it
Good.
until it now runs back to, so each line is one run, each line is one run. So as many information that you have, so it's the line that determine how many
Oh yeah, that's why I said that is I chose it
Yeah,
horizontal.
yeah. Lanre and Dami are correct. So it's meant to be, their explanation is perfect as well. Lanre said there are three test datas there based on the rules, and Dami said the same thing as well. So what you're going to be counting, or how you know the number of times your test would run, is based on the what do they call it? The rows of your test data. So we're not counting it like this. We're not counting it based on the column. It's based on the rows, because the first name, last name, email address, and height are going to be run once. Like when Chrome Java is filling in all the data, it's going to be filled in at once, then it's going to submit the form, then it's going to bring up another Chrome browser, then run the same thing for Tonya again. So that's two. Submit the form, bring up another Chrome browser, then run the same thing again for GD. I don't know where I got the name from, but it's going to run it again for GD, and then that's the third one. So it's going to run 3 different times. So it's not going to be 4 based on the column, but it's 3 based on the rows. So now I'm going to run this scenario outline alone. I'm not going to run the very first one. So I'm going to run just the scenario outline alone. And I'm expecting my Chrome driver to open up 3 times and to run the test on 3 different occasions as well. So let me rebuild my project. And for me to run just the scenario outline and not the 2 scenarios that I've got in the file, all I need to do is to click on the run button here. So it's only going to run this specific scenario for me and not the one above it. But if I want to run the 2 scenarios, which would then mean that it's going to run 4 times altogether, then I need to click on the feature file itself, then click on run feature inquiry page. But I want to run just this new scenario I've added into my feature file. So I'm going to click on the button, the run button here, and click on run scenario.
Only if I may add before you run, is it advisable for each scenario to have the quit code, or it can work?
Is it the driver that quit?
Yes.
Yeah, it's going to have the quit code, because you don't want your Chrome browsers to be low, like a lot on the bottom of your screen. So it's just advisable to always have the driver.quit. So if you read the explanation of driver.quit versus driver.close, you will see that they have got 2 different explanations. One of them is going to, so driver.quit is going to close the Chrome driver that is in focus, and also any instance of, it's going to close the Chrome browser in focus that is currently running, and also any instance of Chrome browser as well that could be running behind the scenes on your laptop. While driver.close would only close the Chrome browser in focus at that instance. So it will not kill off or close off Chrome driver running in the background. So it's always advisable to have driver.
What I mean is we did not add it to the second scenario. That's what I'm trying to say.
But it's already here. Then the form is submitted. Driver.quit. We are reusing the previous steps.
Okay, is because okay. I was thinking that because the new scenario we did, the code was under that, it will not work. You have to put. So that's what I was thinking.
Oh, no. It's still gonna work.
Okay.
Like the order doesn't really matter. The order that matters is what you have in your feature file.
Okay. I get
Yeah.
it.
So let's try to run this one now. You can see it's filling in the height as 160. So the height for the second person should be different. As 1. Example 2, she filling Tanis, Tonya, Tanis, the email, and the height. That's the height. Example 3. Okay. All right. I don't know why if it picked up this one. I can obviously guarantee that the one that I ran, I told it to run all past, which is down here. I've got example 1 for Oyi, example 2 for Tonya, example 3 for GD. I don't know, maybe because the scenario names are the same. Positive test for the inquiry form. I'm gonna put 4 different users. And let me see what happens, because it shouldn't be picking up this very first one. I did not run that one. So let me rebuild again. And I'll just run just this scenario outline alone. All done. Run. Yeah. So I think it was the scenario name that was having the issue. Maybe because they were the same. Or you can see I changed the second scenario outline name to something a bit different. I just added for different users at the end. And you can all see the 3 tests all passed, or the 3 scenarios all passed. So we have example 1, example 2, and example 3, which is also the same as this one, 1, 2, and 3. So that's basically what scenario outline is all about. And the next thing we're going to look at now is a negative scenario, which is going to be on the same inquiry form as well. And I need to sort of determine which of the fields I want to have a negative scenario for. Actually,
the best to use the one that has a drop down.
No, I want to use a field, but before I do that, I'm going to take us through the form again. So this is the form, assuming I've filled out all the required fields on the form. Or to be honest, the only required fields are first name and last name, which is under name, and then email, because you can see the star asterisk there. The red asterisk is there. So that basically means that those fields are compulsory. So if I don't fill out these fields, then I would not be able to submit this form. So I'm going to give that a try now. I'm going to add an invalid email, for example. So it's even already telling me please enter a valid email address, but I'm not going to change it just yet. But I want to click on the submit button. So me clicking on submit button, I'm trying to validate if the test is going to pass or fail, and I'm expecting it to pass because I don't have a valid email address in that field. So if I click on submit, you can obviously see there's a warning message that pops up that says, please enter a valid email. And if I omit this whole field as well, what happens? This field is required. I'm not able to submit the form also. So I want to do the same. I want to try the same thing for the name. So assuming I omit the first name field, what happens? Amazing. I'm not able to submit the form. And if I do the same thing for the last name also, what happens? The last name field is required. If I try the same thing for, let me try the same thing for where are you located? This form is obviously going to go through because the field is optional. So if I click on submit, the form is definitely going to go through because the specific field is not an optional, it's not a compulsory one, it's optional. So I can't do a validation on that one because my test is going to pass regardless because the field is not compulsory. The field is optional, so people can decide to fill it or not. So the 2 or the 3 main fields I can do a validation on or I can obviously, so the 3 main fields I can do a validation on are first name, last name, and email address field. And those are the 3 fields that I can run negative scenarios on as well, because they are the compulsory ones. Because if you don't fill any one of those 3, your form is not going to get submitted. And that is what we are trying to validate in when we run a negative test. So if I go back to my IntelliJ, so I'm going to be omitting the email address field. And when I omit the email address field and I submit this one, I'm going to get a warning message that says this field is required. So there are 2 things I'm going to do in the test scenario I'm going to be writing. I'm going to be writing a new test scenario for the email address field, and I'm going to be writing a new test scenario for this validation as well, because the previous validations that we've always done is the form is submitted, but in this case, the form is not submitted. So in here we have, when I click the submit button, the form is submitted. If you're writing a negative test, in this case, when I click the submit button, the form is not submitted, but instead a warning message is shown on the specific field I'm doing validation on, which in this case is the email address field. So my then step is going to change in this case. It's going to sound something like, then a warning message is shown on the email address field. We are doing a validation on the first name field. You can say, then a warning message is shown on the first name field. So I'm going to go back into my IntelliJ now, and I'm going to copy the very first scenario that we have written, and I'm going to modify it. Because I could have easily, I don't just want to waste our time by typing each one of them out. So I'm just going to copy that one and modify. And starting from the scenario name, in this case, I'm writing a negative test, not a positive one this time around. So I have given I navigate to the website and I fill out the first name and last name field. So after filling out the first name and last name field, and I omit. So I want to not fill out anything there, and I omit the email address field. And I enter my height, select all the other ones, which are all going to be the same as before. When I click the submit button, the form is not going to be submitted this time around, but instead, then a warning message is shown on the email address. So as you can see, I need to create step definitions for, and I omit the email address field, and also the then step that says then a warning message is shown on the email address field. So I'm just going to go ahead and click on create all step definitions for the two of them. And they are created down here. We have, and I omit the email address field, then a warning message is shown on the email address field. Amazing. So as usual, I need to get the locator for the email address field, and I obviously currently have it up here, and I've gotten it by name. So all I need to do is driver, find element by name, dot send keys. So if I'm omitting something, for instance, what do I need to put in the send keys? Can someone guess? Does anyone know?
No. Guessing. Null.
Oh, null.
Yes.
Okay. What about somebody else? What am I meant to put there? Okay, so I'm actually not meant to put anything in double quotes since I'm not filling out any, I'm not sending in any values into that field. And that is what I intend to do. I don't want to fill out the field at all. So I'm just going to leave it as blank. I'm not going to put anything in the double quotes, and nothing is going to be filled as well. And you will see that when we're on the test. So if you're putting in null, that's already a value. But even if you put in null, that's a string value you're sending in, but it's not a valid email address. But in this case, my own step is saying I want to omit the field. So if I want to say, but if it's a case of, and I enter invalid, then you can put null, or you can say null at Gmail. That's not a valid email address as far as it does not have .com or .co.uk or any other email extensions that are valid. So if I'm putting in null, then that means my step needs to change to, and I enter invalid. But in this case, I want to omit that field. I want to ignore the field completely. I don't want to fill anything in. So I'm just going to be passing in an empty string. That's what I'm going to be passing in this case. I didn't put a space there. I didn't put anything. I only put those double quotes and nothing is getting passed into it. So that's me passing in an empty string. So right, so I filled out the step definition for and I enter the email address field. The next one I'm going to do is for the then step that says then a warning message is shown on the email address field. So we can obviously see from here that it says this field is required. So what do I need to do? I'm going to be writing an assertion for this specific step. And like I mentioned previously, I think the previous assertion that we used was assert true. Amazing. So we use assert true to validate that the box or the sentence was or is displayed on the page when we submit the form. But in this case, I'm going to be using assert equals. So I'm going to be comparing string value that I'm going to send in my code to the string value that is going to be gotten by Chrome driver for this particular sentence here. So what I need to do now is to get the locator for this sentence that says this field is required. And how do I do that? As usual, you right click on inspect, get the selector icon and go to that sentence that you're trying to inspect. So we have this one here, and I'm going to get it by XPath. I'm going to check that it is unique. So it's showing 1 of 1. Sweet. Then all I need to do is to go back into my IntelliJ. And then I'm going to start with driver dot find element by XPath. So is finding the element for this sentence that says this field is required. So when it finds the element, what do I want it to do? I want it to get the specific text for me because I want to compare this text with the text I'm going to be passing in my step definition. So the text that is going to get here is this field is required full stop because there's a full stop behind it. So this is the text that is going to be gotten by Chrome driver when it finds this element and it gets this sentence for me. So what do I need to do in my IntelliJ? So at the end of the bracket, instead of saying .click, .send keys, or dot is displayed, all I need to do is to say .get text. So it's going to get this text for me. But then where do I want it to store the text? Because it's just going to be hanging or just dangling in the air. But I want it to store it in a container for me because I'm going to compare the value stored in that container with the value I'm going to be sending in my code as well. So when you want to store something in a container, you can either store it as an integer, a string, or Boolean, or any other Java keywords or variables. But in this case, I wanted to store it as a string because it's a sentence that is going to be gotten for me. It's not a number. It's not a number that contains a decimal. And then it's not a true or false value. This is just a sentence. And sentences are stored in string container. So when it gets the text for me using .get text, I want it to store it in a container. And I'm going to give that container a name as well. So that's going to be called expected warning message. And this is me basically assigning value to a variable. So this is what we refer to in Java as, I think it's called Java assigning, to be honest, because you're basically assigning a value, which is a string value in this case that is going to read this field is required full stop. You're assigning that value to a variable called, or a variable container called expected warning message. So the container in this case is going to be called, or it is called expected warning message. And this container is what I'm going to use to do my comparison. So instead of having this long sentence to do my comparison, I'm just going to use this container name because it just makes your code look neat and easily readable as well. And this is what I'm going to use to do my comparison when I get to my assertion step. So now I mentioned that when you're doing an assert equals, you need two values because you're going to be comparing two different values in the assertion method. So my very first value is what is in this container, which is expected warning message. My second value is going to be my actual warning message. What am I actually wanting the warning message to look like? Actual warning message. So this container names can be anything as far as it's reasonable. So it doesn't have to be, you don't have to write it as expected warning message. It just has to be something reasonable. So in this case, like I mentioned, I already know that the warning message that's going to be displayed is this field is required, full stop. There's a full stop at the end. You don't put a full stop and you run your test, the assertion is going to fail because the values that you're comparing are not the same. So when you're dealing with assertions, they are very, very case sensitive. So you need to be conscious of what your expected value is and what actual value you're passing in your code as well. So I've run the manual test. I'm expecting the warning message to read this field is required, full stop. So that's just what I'm going to add in my actual warning message here. So this field is required with my full stop at the end. So now when it comes to writing my assertion, my assert equals, so this is where I'm going to compare container 1 with container 2. And how do I do that? Assert 2s dot assert equals so I'm going to be picking the string one, but actually I can actually pick the integer one, but if I don't add an integer in there and I add a string, then it's going to be using the string one instead. But I'm just going to pick the string one here. Let's say string actual, string expected, assert equals. Right. So this is expecting two values. And what are the two values? Value 1 is going to be my actual warning message, which I have here. So you can see I've typed it up and it's also bringing it down on the list for me. I only typed it AC actual and it's bringing it down on the list for me. And it's also a string value as well, which is a string like here. And the second value I'm going to compare is expected warning message. Expected warning message. Right. And then I'm going to add my driver.quit because I want you to close the instance of that Chrome browser and also any Chrome driver running in the background as well. So I've written my assertion for the very last step, which is the then step here. And then what I can do now is to build the project and run the test. So there are two things I want you to note down. I want you to note the email field when it gets there. It's going to get skipped. Nothing is going to be filled in because I didn't send in any values in my step definition. And the other thing I want you to take note of when we click the submit button is a warning message is going to be displayed. And we're going to be validating that the warning message we've passed in here exactly like this is the same warning message that is going to be gotten by this locator. And then the comparison is then going to be done. So my assertion here is going to pass because I'm expecting it to pass because I've picked up the right locator and I've also sent in the right wording that I'm doing a comparison for as well. So let us try to run this test now. I don't know if I've built, but let me just rebuild the project again. I can't remember. And then let me run just this scenario, which is the negative scenario. So you can see the email field is not, nothing is filled in there. Sweet. So that passed. It's done the validation for us, and it's also done the comparison here. So another thing I can do is to show you what the .get text value is for this specific line, to actually tell you that the value gotten is, so even before your assertion runs, you can, before the test gets to this line, which is line 135, you can always know if it's going to pass or fail. And I'm going to show you how. I showed you in the last class as well. So I'm going to check, I'm going to
Okay, sorry
evaluate
to
this
jump in.
expression.
Apologies. I just hope that if I didn't say it now, we might not be able to go back there. Why did it pass? Because I was expecting the page to show the error that it should go back to that form so that you can put in the right information there. Or maybe I missed something. Sorry.
Well, I thought it went back when we clicked on submit button. It did not go back to the did you not
Go
go
back to the email at all to tell us.
Oh, it is, so I think it's because the test is running fast. So let me show you again. So I'm going to put a breakpoint here. So it's because the test was running fast, and then you obviously validated that the text comparison that we've done here is the same. It passed, then it just quits the browser for. So I'm going to put a breakpoint here. I'm going to comment this one out for you to see that it actually went there. So let me run this test again. Let me rebuild, then run. So it's not going to close the browser for me because I've commented the driver to quit out. But let me run it again so that you actually see that it went there. Yeah, so you can see it went back to that field for you to fill it up. So the reason why I didn't see it previously was because everything was moving too fast, and the driver that quit just, it validated that the field was required, like the warning message was showing, and then just quit the browser for you. So now that I've commented that line out, you can see it came back up here telling you to fill out the field. So does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay, sweet. So as I was saying, I'm going to put a breakpoint here, and I'm going to tell you how you can know if your test is going to pass before it gets to this assertion validation that is doing on line 135. So I'm going to stop the test on this line 132, to evaluate this expression, and I'm going to pick it with .get text. So .get text means that it's going to get the text comparison that is doing on line 135 for me. And I'm expecting the text that is going to be gotten to be the same as I've written on line 133, which is this field is required. So let's give that a try again. I'm just going to rebuild the project, even though I didn't make any change, but let me just rebuild. And then debug, instead of running, I clicked on debug. Sweet. So the test has stopped on line 132 for me, and I'm going to evaluate the part after the equal sign. So I've just basically highlighted driver to dot get text and the two brackets. I'm going to right click on that and I'm going to click on evaluate expression. So you can see it's already gotten the same expression for me up here, up to driver.find element. And all I need to do is click on evaluate. Then it should tell me the string value that is going to get. So this field is required, and this is definitely gotten from year. So this is the value that is shown on here. And you can see that this value here, this field is required, full stop, is the same as the value that I've written for the actual warning message that I'm expecting. So obviously I'm expecting line 135 to pass because the values are the same. So all I need to do now for the test to keep on running is to click on the run button or the resume button program here. Resume program button, sorry. Resume program button, I'll click on this one and it should run in the background. And then driver quit should obviously quit that browser for me. And there you have it. So that's just how you write a negative test scenario and also assertions for the any warning message or error message that comes up at the end. Amazing. So we've written that one. So the last thing I want to touch tonight is what I call background. So background in Cucumber is used to define a series of steps that are common in all of our tests in the feature file. So instead of having there's nothing bad in having the same steps in multiple places, but it could be a case of maybe you updated one of the steps and then you have to be looking for the same steps to update in your specific feature file as well, because a feature file can have like 1,000 lines, and that is definitely possible. And you don't want to be looking for those lines to be updating them one by one. There's an easier way to do it, but it's just best to like use backgrounds within your test, because it just makes you look like you know what you're doing when you obviously know what you're doing. And then it's just nice just to use those keywords in your Gherkin step also. So I'm going to ask a question now. So who can tell me, if you look through the three, I'm going to go through the 3 feature files. I'm going to scroll through them and I want you to tell me the unique line. Oh, if I ask this question, everybody's going to start mentioning all the lines. But I'm going to ask you, let me think of a way to ask this question. Right, so let me explain further before I ask my question. So you can see my given I navigate to the website and I fill out the first name, email address. There are some common lines there within the 3 feature files. Within the 3 scenarios in this one feature file, there are definitely a lot of common lines there, and I absolutely agree with you. But with the way background works, your background is like a prerequisite to running your scenarios. So your background is going to contain prerequisite steps that you would usually have in your scenario steps as well. So it's like a continuation that is going to be happening in your scenario. So the step need to match each other. So assuming you have given I navigate to the website and I fill out first name, given I navigate to the website in your background, then your scenario then is going to start with, and I fill out the first name and last name field for all of them, because that is the that's how the steps are consecutively. So your background is going to go like this. So once you run your feature file, your background is going to kick off first. So the background kicks off, it runs the step underneath them, then it goes into the first feature file to continue the step. So once why do I keep saying feature file? Let me just go back to 2 seconds. So the way background works is once the feature file runs, once you've run the feature file from here, then it goes straight to the background first. So the background is going to run the common step that needs to be first run when you're running your test manually. So if we run the common step, which is given I navigate to the website, then it would then go into the scenario to continue the rest of that scenario for you. And then once it finishes up, submits the form, then it closes the browser, then it opens up a new one, then it goes back into your background again because you have a common step there. It runs that common step, then does the continuation in your next scenario as well, finishes it up, then it comes back to the third scenario, runs the first background, then it comes back into the third scenario to continue the rest of the step. So now my question now is, based on how we have our steps here, what is the common step in these 3 scenarios? What is that one common step that will run for all of these 3 scenarios? It's just one step that's common. If you're running it in a consecutive manner. So what one step is common within these 3 scenarios that we can move to the background?
Given that I navigate to the website.
Okay. Do we have any other response?
When I click on
Sorry?
when I click on the submit button.
Right. I know that that's a common step, but it's not going to be consecutive. If I move it to the background, then your test is going to fail because that's not what's going to run first.
Okay.
So in a consecutive manner, the common step in all the 3 scenarios, like Dami has responded to, is giving I navigate to the website. So that is what is common in all of the steps. So we have given I navigate to the website here, given I navigate to the website here, given I navigate to the website here. So I can move this single step into my background. The next step is not common for all of them. We have, I fill out the first name and last name field. I fill out the first name and last name field, but this one is taken in parameters. Then we have, I fill out the first name and last name field as well. But if I move this, I fill out the first name and last name field to my background, then the line 22 for my scenario outline test is going to fail. So because the scenario outline is taken in parameters, but what I'm moving to my background is not taken in parameters. So the only common step that I can move to my background is giving I navigate to the website. So how do I do that? So at the very, just after your feature line, at the very start of your feature file, just after that, we have what we call background. And what I'm going to do is to copy what I have here and move it to the background. And I'm going to comment out the other given lines in my steps. So like I mentioned, when I run the feature file, my background would run first, given I navigate to the website, then it will do all of this. Then the second Chrome browser opens up, goes to the background, given I navigate to the background. Sorry, given I navigate to the website, then it will go into the scenario outline to run this one. for Oyin. Then it's going to open another Chrome browser, go back to the background, then come back here to run this one for Tonia. Open another Chrome browser, go to the background, then run this one for GD. Then it's going to open another browser, go to the background, and then run the negative scenario that I have here. So my final question tonight is how many times or how many tests are going to be run for all of these tests in my feature file, in my inquiry page.feature file? How many tests will be run? So we have the positive, we have the scenario for the positive, we have the scenario outline for the positive test, then we have the negative test. So how many tests are going to be run? How many times do I expect my Chrome browser to open up?
9 times. Hopefully, I got you right. 9 times.
So who just answered the question?
Larry.
Larry said 9 times. Okay. Any other response?
It's gonna be 5 times.
Dami said 5 times. Okay. Any other response?
I think it should be 5.
Izu said 5 times. Any other response?
I believe it should be 5 as well.
Yep. So majority carries the vote is meant to be 5 times. So Izu, I'm going to ask you, why do you think it's 9?
No, I didn't say 9. I said 5.
Oh, sorry. So I don't know.
I'm the one that said 9.
9. Okay, Larry, why do you think it's 9?
The reason, because the names is three names there, and it's gonna run the each scenario 3 times. That's how I did the calculation.
So is it this one you're talking about?
This one, there, yeah. If you only, yeah,
But it's
only
not 9 though. It's going to be, so this is 1.
that scenario, yeah, that's one.
Okay. 2, 3, 4. Then my negative is 5. So it's going to run 5 times. So do you understand the calculation now?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm just going to review the project. Done. Right. So instead of running each of the scenarios, I'm going to run the feature file itself. So it runs all the scenarios for me and is meant to run 5 times. So let's give that a run. I'm guessing this is 1. So this is running for the scenario outline. So this is 2. And this is the third one. Number 4. Number 5, the negative one. Nice. So we can all see the very first one, which is this one. We have the year, positive test for inquiry form. Then we have 3 examples under this. 3 examples under the scenario outline. So we have the very first example for owing. You can see owing here, example 1. Example 2, we have Tonia. Example 3, we have GD. So this is for the second scenario, and that makes it 4 altogether. 3 year, 1 year. And then for our negative one, we have, and I omit the email address, then a warning message is shown, and that makes it 5 altogether. And that's our inquiry page and feature file all passed. So this is where I'm going to stop the class for today, and we've been able to achieve what I said we're going to cover at the very beginning. And in the next class, we're going to be looking into page object, and yeah, we'll look into page object next, and oops, we'll look into page object next. I feel like page object will take most of our time in the next class. I don't know if it's going to be tomorrow. So if people are having a number of issues that need resolving, they'll probably use the whole of tomorrow to do that, because it's just a 1-hour class with me tomorrow. And we'll look at page object next week, Wednesday, or we can start page object tomorrow if we don't have a lot of issues to resolve. And then we continue page object next week, Wednesday as well. And then we'll also look at hooks as well. And yeah, so that's just all done for tonight. Oh, I should have said we should stop the recording, but yeah, let's stop the recording.